we're going to talk a little bit about building an inclusive community, having to do with grants that include all members of your community in your projects. So when we talk about accessibility, what are we talking about? Accessibility is the practice of making information, activities, and/or environments sensible, meaningful, and usable for as many people as possible. So when we're planning projects for our town, our business, our organization, it's good to keep accessibility in mind so we can be inclusive in all we do. So the American with Disabilities Act, you are probably familiar with it on some level. If you're a business owner, you're probably very familiar with it. It's divided into 5 titles, but Title II and Title III are what most of us pay attention to. So Title II is public entities and public transportation services, programs, activities of state and local governments and how they have to be accessible. And Title III is public accommodations and commercial facilities. This is business and nonprofits serving the public. And it also has to do with how those organizations need to be inclusive. So there aren't a lot of funds that are specifically for making an inclusive space. You might need to work on a funding plan, for instance. You probably aren't saying, oh, I need an handicap accessible something without like another project. So I'm making my park more accessible and I'm doing a few other things. I'm making my building more accessible and we're doing some renovations. So when you work on your funding strategy, these are the sort of things to break out into smaller needs. And then you take your funding strategy and you may have to pull together many different funding sources to achieve the accessibility that you need. So one of the ways, besides grants and loans and donations, is through the tax code. So it's really overlooked sometimes, but the IRS helps small businesses take some of the cost from ADA related improvements, and they have credits available. So this is something to make sure to ask your accountant about, maybe even before you start on a project. So you might need to get equipment, you might need to make ramps, update your bathrooms, and that sort of thing. You may be able to get a credit, which comes right off your tax burden of up to $5,000. So that's basically a grant from the government. There's also tax deductions. With a deduction comes off your revenue, a little different than a credit, a little less impactful, but you can deduct up to $15,000. And this is for businesses of any size. So this is the sort of thing that your accountant would probably know. But if they don't know you're working on something for accessibility, then it'd be really good to point that out to them. So be sure to take advantage of the tax code when it applies to you and can be a real benefit to you and people you're making it accessible for. So we're going to look at a few grants. Some are specific to accessibility, but some are just general. And when you look at a grant with a very general topic, that allows you to take that money and use it for your accessibility project or other things. So this one is T-Mobile Hometown Grants. You can apply basically anytime. They just award them on a quarterly basis. And the slide deck you have with you, you'll be able to click on the T-Mobile and it'll give you a link that'll go to the information about T-Mobile. So again, this is one of the grants that have just really broad guidelines. You would present to them your interest, what you're working on with your project, add in there that you're using, would like to use some of the money for accessibility. Sometimes that wins you some extra points. So this one focuses on improving communities as a whole. So it may not specifically say this is to make your project more inclusive, but that certainly leads to community improvement. This is rolling applications, which means you can apply at any point, and they have rolling approvals for their grants. Again, you'll have a link here on the deck. Now, this one is a very big, really great grant. It reopens in January. Usually it closes around late March, but this is one that you have to do a lot of preparation for. So if you click on the link, you'll get to see more about what you need to do in preparation. This is up to $500,000. Usually the amount of the grant also lets you know how much time and effort you're going to need to put into the grant. So with this one, you have to have a match. It is only available for counties and municipalities, government entities. However, they may be able to partner with you if you are working on a park of some sort of improvement to a park around your area. They may be able to include you into a grant. But for those of you who are with counties and municipalities, this is a good one to look into. You can build or adapt facilities to be accessible for people of all ages, all ability levels. That isn't specifically what it's for, but that is something you could include in your grant proposal. Make a splash. Now, this one's cool. It is ongoing. You can apply at any point. What this is if your area, town has a splash pad, which my area has been building them like crazy because they're really awesome. If you have a splash pad, but maybe the floor of it is concrete, you were able to make the splash pad, but all you had available was concrete. Maybe you roughed it up a little so it's not slippery, but it may not be the most attractive. So what Life Floor is, they're a company that make the rubberized flooring that you would put on. If you apply for this grant and are accepted for it, they will provide the Life Floor color block bottom for it. They're very creative, they're colorful, they're just beautiful. It's a very specific grant for a very specific use. But when you add those rubberized surfaces, you're able to make it much more accessible for people that have maybe limited ability to walk, because they can sit, and they can also, it makes wheelchair traction better because the rubberized flooring provides a lot of friction. So the next three, they're similar, but they're for different uses. They're all from the Tennis Association. So this one is Collegiate Wheelchair Program Grant, up to $5,000. This is if a college in your area or your college, they have either a collegiate wheelchair program or they like to have one. You have one in the planning. This is one that's accepting applications now, and it's up to $5,000 to help build or create a collegiate wheelchair program for tennis. The next one from the Tennis Association, this is for adaptive tennis. These will reopen in the fall, but again, you can click on the link and you can read information about how to get ready to apply for the grant. This assists in promotion, implementation, and growth of adaptive tennis programs at the community level. So the other was collegiate, this is community. This, the adaptive tennis has become really popular in the last few years, and it's only growing. But adaptive tennis can mean wheelchair. It can also mean people with other type of intellectual disabilities, autism, any sort of adaptive tennis that may need some sort of accommodation in order to make tennis an accessible sport. This is wheelchair tennis grassroots grant. So this is specific to wheelchair, like the collegiate grant, but this one is for community programs. It could be used for assets, for purchasing equipment for it. It can be used for coaching, events, summer camps. So if you're planning a wheelchair tennis summer camp, which it's become much more popular, then this grant may be useful. It reopens in the fall, so you have time to collect the information, and then you would implement it the following summer. Unless you live in an area that's just got a good tennis climate all year long. So this is the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Christopher Reeve, of course, Superman, who was paralyzed after an accident, and they do a lot of work with accessibility. And this is the Direct Effect Quality of Life Grant Program. This is only available for 501c3 organizations. It can be up to $25,000, depending on what you need for your project. It's very broad in scope. You'll be able to click on the link and see the type of things that they like to fund. And this year's cycle is closed, but toward the end of 2024, it'll reopen and you'll be able to apply for it, but you can see the information needed to apply. Whenever you're looking at this type of grant, it's great to look at past recipients and see maybe what elements were more attractive to the grantor that you might be able to add to your proposal. The demonstration grant. This is a really good grant that will reopen next year. $10,000 to $15,000, small grants. Sometimes those are easier to apply for. Sometimes they're easier to get. Not always, but they're a good way to start. They give small grants to nonprofits and government entities, municipalities and counties. And it's for permanent physical improvements in the community. So this is the sort of thing that is specifically meant to make a project, a place more accessible. And it would be a really good one to apply for if you're looking to improve accessibility, to be able to get into buildings that may currently just have stairs. It's a good one to look into. Lowe's Hometowns. This is really one of my favorites. Again, it reopens for the 2025, likely in January. This is one where the community nominates you through Lowe's for a project. That's pretty easy to get someone in the community to recommend you. This allows for physical renovations or improvement, ADA compliant projects included, but not limited to. So it doesn't have to be used for making something more accessible, but that is something that they like to see. So this is, I like to show this Lumbee Land Development Project. It was a winner in 2023. And they took an existing park and they wanted to make that park more accessible for everyone in their community to use. So they, at the Lumbee Tribal Cultural Center, they're using the funds to upgrade their outdoor recreation area to make them safer, more accessible. And they will take the wood ground cover off, which if any of you have been around that, it's not very shock absorbent, has to be replaced pretty frequently, at least every year. So they're removing that and they're adding a rubberized surfacing, which again, like the Life Floor, gives you a lot more grip, a lot more comfort. If you fall, it's much more shock absorbing. And they're also going to install border edging and a new play structure specifically for accessibility. I love that project. So that's some ways to take grants that aren't necessarily for ADA compliance or building accessibility, but to be able to work that into your plan and hopefully get some of your project funded through these other grants. If you're lucky enough to find grants that are specifically for ADA projects, to build ramps, to build accessibility, to add railings, things like that, that is great. They are great to apply for, but they're a lot harder to come across than these general grants are. So keep an eye on Uplift. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, here's a QR code where you can subscribe. If you want to chat, please email me at upliftncgrants.loans@gmail.com. What our grants and loans department does is we can meet with you one-on-one if you'd like to, discuss your project, break it down into the smaller pieces, and work on a funding plan with you, and hope to find some grants or loans or other non-grant opportunities that may be able to work for your project or pieces of your project. So please email me, go to the uplifttourism.com site, look at our Knowledge Center. We have a large database of grants and loans, and we also have a lot of other resources on there. We keep all of our webinars from the multitude of trainings we do on the website, and you can watch those as well.